Chris is basically a jack of all trades, but a master of none. He's just an average guy with a talent that lets him learn anything in an instant. To make a name for himself, he ended up joining the hero's party. With his talent, he played a significant role in the party, handling all sorts of tasks, which earned him the nickname, the Great Extra. But before he could truly blossom and harness his potential, he met a tragic end when the Age of Destruction began. It was during the time when the Demon King of Carnage, who hailed from the Magic Empire, started wreaking havoc in the Dominion of Light, and Hero Evan was not strong enough to stop him. As expected, they failed, and the Dominion of Light eventually fell into the hands of the Demon King of Carnage. Before dying, Hero Evan had one last wish. He wanted Chris to ascend to the role of hero. He wished he could turn back time and make this last wish turn into reality. However, Chris didn't share the same sentiments. After enduring so much hardship in life, this death felt more like mercy, a gateway to freedom from misery. Even if given a second chance, Chris would rather have been born into a rich family. That was his final thought before he perished and regressed back in time. He was reborn into the body of a young master of the Magic Empire, the very empire from which the Demon King of Carnage hailed from. For extra context, the Dominion of Light is the place where humans live, while the Magic Empire is the place where demons live, which are also called fiends. The place he was born into was the Dark Magic Clan, one of the 12 clans that support the Magic Empire, as his eerie name suggests. From what he understands, he had regressed 15 years back in time, 5 years before the beginning of the Age of Destruction. Now Chris is a rich brat, but the owner of the body he now possesses is far from pleasant. He's inhabiting the body of Christian Van Baron Khazar. According to Chris's past life memories, Christian inherits the noble Van as his middle name, meaning he's part of a branch family. The House of Count Khazar is a branch family of Baron County, also known as the Dark Magic Clan. Although the Khazar family is just a branch, it still holds a lot of power and influence due to its good standing within the Dark Magic Clan. Their wealth only amplifies their influence. To further emphasize the Khazar family's status, there's not a single fiend within the Magic Empire who doesn't recognize their influence. The Khazar family has 2 potential heirs, but the eldest son, Christian, is a troublemaker who always attracts problems. But the crucial thing to note here is that Christian was eventually murdered by his relatives. This is brutal news for Chris, who has just inherited Christian's body and is now about to die. All Chris ever wanted was to be born as the son of a regular rich family with no unnecessary drama. But beating himself up over his bad luck won't do him any good. So he needs to think hard about what to do to avoid dying. He still has 2 years before Christian dies. It's important to note that he was eliminated within the House of Count Khazar, a family that places great importance on honor. This likely means Christian was an absolute good-for-nothing, and thus murdered by his own family in order to avoid any damage to the family's name. So, Chris hopes that if he becomes a nice person and keeps a low profile, he might dodge that death bullet. Now that the issue of dying has been dealt with, Chris starts thinking about living a comfortable life with all the money he has. But his daydreams soon hit a snag when he remembers the Age of Destruction that will start in the future. The Demon King of Carnage started the war to sacrifice humanity and complete Ragnarok. By the time anyone realized this, it was already too late, and both the Dominion of Light and the Magic Empire met their tragic ends because of Demon King's selfish desire. If Chris truly wants to survive, he'll have to figure out a way to stop the coming apocalypse. The Demon King of Carnage is powerful on his own, but he also has an entire army of loyal fiends from the Magic Empire. The only way Chris can stop all this madness is to become more powerful than the Demon King of Carnage. The only way to do that is to become the Demon Emperor himself and sit at the pinnacle of the Magic Empire. He has 5 years before the Age of Destruction begins, which is enough time to come up with a plan. If he succeeds, there's no doubt that the entire Magic Empire will belong to him. Later, we see Christian getting scolded by his father for leaving his room, despite being grounded. The head of the house isn't stomaching the fact that Chris dared to show his filthy mug without properly repenting for the embarrassing incident he caused not long ago. Count Khazar gives him one last warning, making it clear that his next act of negligence will be his last, once his head is chopped off his body. The menacing, almost suffocating aura of Count Khazar is so intimidating that Chris is literally shuddering instinctively. Eventually, he sincerely apologizes for all the wrongdoings he has committed until now. Chris is trying to mend his relationship with Count Khazar because he wants to get rid of the bad image everyone holds of Christian. This is the only way he can move forward with his plans. He continues his apologies, hoping to sway the Count's heart. But it looks like a few words of apology aren't cutting it. The Count has no intention of believing his son's words after all the trouble he has caused. Meanwhile, Chris is trying to figure out what in the hell this bastard Christian pulled off to make the Count lose all trust in him. There are so many horror stories Chris has heard about Christian that he isn't even sure which one is the most recent. So, He reminds his father that he lost a portion of his memories a few days ago. Because of that, he doesn't even remember what he did that made his father lose all trust in him. He goes on to say that, in an effort to remember, he reflected on his past actions, only to realize how awful he had been all this time. He completely owns up to the downfall he caused to his father's reputation. But even with all of this, the Count is still unwilling to believe him. After all, he has heard these excuses countless times before. Seeing no other way to convince his father, Chris decides to go extreme. He sincerely requests to be sent into the punishment cave, offering to spend up to a month there to prove that he has truly changed. Here's a quick explanation of the punishment cave. Apparently, it's a place made to imprison high-status fiends. There's no light, and all 5 of the captive's senses are blocked. It only takes a few days before a captive's mind is completely broken, driving them into madness. With that in mind, Count Khazar doubts Chris would even last a few hours, let alone an entire month. Chris has already considered all possibilities, but this is the only way left to earn his father's trust, so he is willing to take on the challenge. Count Khazar, having seen Christian make countless big promises before, is hesitant. Every time it ended in disappointment. But this time, he's willing to play along and give him one last chance. However, he makes one thing abundantly clear. If Chris fails to prove he's a different person after spending an entire month there, he will be banished from the clan. Chris already knows that being banished is basically a death sentence. There are countless enemies Christian has made in his life, and the moment he loses the protection of the clan, they will all come for his life. Still, my guy accepts the challenge. However, if he succeeds, he wants his father to grant him one favor. Count Khazar scoffs at Chris's confidence but agrees nonetheless, so long as he truly changes for the better, though he highly doubts that's even remotely possible. Later, as Chris sits in his lavish room, a fiend arrives to inform him that the punishment cave has been prepared. This guy's name is Cox, a half-vampire and the butler of the house of Count Khazar. Chris acknowledges his words, and after a while he begins making his way there, carrying a luggage bag on his shoulders. As he walks through the corridors, every servant and household member whispers among themselves. They're all convinced this good-for-nothing must be plotting something again. They recall the recent trouble he caused, insulting the young lady of the Poison Magic clan. The mess was so bad that Count Khazar had to personally bow his head and apologize to the Poison Magic clan. Now it makes sense why the Count was so furious and dismissive of Christian earlier. The humiliation must have been so bad that the man probably wanted to die from embarrassment. Some people in the background even start betting that Christian won't last more than 2 days in the punishment cave. But my guy just smirks in confidence because he knows he's about to subvert their expectations. Meanwhile, his little brother watches from the sidelines, keeping a close eye on him. A while later, they finally arrive at the punishment cave. To emphasize just how dangerous and please don't come closer this place is, 2 Death Knights stand as guards at the entrance. They might look intimidating, but there's no one stopping Chris from entering. However, just as he's about to enter, his little brother calls out from behind. Here is a quick introduction to this puny punk. As you already know, he is Christian's biological younger brother and a model student, Thurn van Boren Khazar. The rest of the introduction can wait because, out of nowhere, this little guy pulls a fast one on his older brother, stopping the sharp tip of his sword just before Chris's eyes. While our boy doesn't react outwardly, his soul inside him has literally died of a heart attack at the sight of that attack coming. Still, Chris keeps his composure and questions his little brother, asking what he's doing here. It turns out Thurn is just here to remind his older brother how pathetic he is. He warns him that if he tarnishes the family name any further, he might as well be dead. Seeing this feisty little punk, Chris is pretty sure Thurn was the one responsible for Christian's death in his previous life. Chris has actually met Thurn before during the Age of Destruction. He was a fiend famous for curse magic. Anyway, Chris reacts to his little brother with a stern glare. Of course, those intense glares make Thurn shudder, while Chris just keeps his tough guy act and enters the cave, shutting the door behind him. This display of attitude leaves Thurn absolutely enraged, as he's not used to seeing this side of his older brother. Cutting back to Chris, he walks through the dark cave, unable to see or hear anything. There's only the faintest sensation left around his fingertips. Thinking about it, this sensation seems deliberately left there so that prisoners can feel the objects they bring inside. Otherwise, they might starve to death if they can't fumble through their supplies. Still, an ordinary person would quickly feel mentally drained in such a place. But this doesn't affect Chris. After all, he's experienced worse during his time as a treasure hunter. To be honest, having his senses cut off is exactly how he wanted it. This way, he can focus inward and look inside himself. It's the only way he'll be able to fix this wreck of a body. Sure, it will take time and a whole lot of luck, but with the medical skills he learned back when they called him the Divine Hand, plus the bone compression art he modified, he is sure that he can pull this off. And being the rich guy he is now, he has access to magic stones with various properties, so fixing his body in this place won't be a problem at all. He honestly thought he wouldn't be able to get his hands on magic stones since they're so expensive. But it looks like this is one of the perks of being rich. In his previous life, Hero Evan and he had to struggle just to obtain them. His first step will be to use a white magic stone, which will purify any toxins in his body. It might be a boring process, but it's an essential stage. He'll need to meticulously clean the toxin buildup across his body with white mana. Even the smallest mistake would cause immense pain, but for Chris, it's a walk in the park. He can handle it just fine without even putting much effort into it. Meanwhile, back with Count Khazar. He asks his butler about Christian. The butler reveals that Christian obediently entered the punishment cave. He's sure that Christian is going to be so wrecked that he won't even have the strength to call for help. These unsettling words only serve to make Count Khazar even more worried. He starts questioning himself, wondering if it was the right decision to let him go inside. Count reflects on how Christian had such a promising future as a child, so he is unsure how he could have broken apart so suddenly. For a moment, he even starts to question if Christian's exceptional talents went to his head. Regardless of the reason behind his downfall, the Count would rather see Christian die crippled than live miserably. As much as he wants to place faith in Christian's words, he just can't bring himself to do it. After all, this isn't the first time his son has tricked him with smooth talk. Count then questions his butler, asking if he noticed Christian carrying anything when he entered the cave. The butler hesitates to reveal anything, but under Count Khazar's scrutiny, he's forced to open his mouth. He reveals that Christian carried magic stones with him into the cave. Among them were dreamstones, which can make anyone hallucinate. The butler fears that since they don't know what exactly Christian is up to, they should open the cave immediately. But Count Khazar responds sternly with a firm no. Even if Christian is plotting something shady, it's all the more reason to let him die there miserably. A month passes, and Count Khazar finds himself standing right outside the cave's entrance. Before Chris even makes an appearance, the Count has already convinced himself that his son is as good as wrecked by now. But of course his expectations are completely subverted when he sees Christian emerging from the cave, with a broad smile on his face. As surprising as it is, there's no denying that Christian has fulfilled his promise by returning as a completely different person. The Count can't help but notice the brightness in his son's eyes, something he hasn't seen since Christian was a child. This change might be admirable, but Count Khazar isn't about to loosen up immediately. He's still firm in his belief that this small achievement isn't enough to convince him that his son has truly changed. However, Christian doesn't back down. He makes it clear that he'll keep working even harder if that's what it takes. Christian is certain his father believes he barely endured the cave, but that's far from the truth. In fact, Christian was so busy training that he didn't even have time to get bored. First off, he optimized his body to master swordplay. Thanks to the white mana stone, he never ran out of juice. But the real game changer was the dreamstone. The butler had tried to stop him from bringing a narcotic mana stone into the cave, but Christian was glad he had stubbornly brought them anyway. The hallucinations caused by the dreamstone drastically reduced the time it took for his metamorphosis. On top of that, he created 2 cores within himself. Christian couldn't help but feel proud of everything he achieved in that deadly cave. He was convinced he was a genius. After all, having 2 cores wasn't something you came across every day. Because of this, he hid his light core inside his darkness core. If anyone discovered this, their reaction would be nothing short of explosive. But his luck didn't stop there. He sensed that someone in the cave was hoping he would break down under the hallucinations, but Christian used that as a catalyst to push himself even further. Back in the present, Christian wants to cash in on the favor his father promised him. He requests permission to use the Black Swamp Knights training grounds. Of course, Count Khazar's face immediately twists with annoyance at such a bold and reckless request. As far as the Count is concerned, a good-for-nothing like Christian has no business being there. After all, the Black Swamp Knights are one of the 3 orders of knights that support the Dark Magic clan, and only the most elite knights are allowed to display their skills there. But Christian stands firm. He's not asking to join their order, just to borrow their training grounds. He believes that watching the bravery of the Black Swamp Knights will have a positive influence on him. After a brief pause, Count Khazar agrees, though he issues a stern warning. Don't disgrace yourself in front of the knights, or it will end with your death. Christian acknowledges the warning, and before his father can leave, he asks for another favor. Later, Christian arrives at the training grounds. As he's minding his business, some knights in the background start murmuring among themselves, recognizing him as the good-for-nothing young master. The knights don't even try to hide the fact that they're bad-mouthing the Count's son, which speaks volumes about the state of the magic empire. Here, strength matters more than social status. There's another reason Christian wanted to come to the Black Swamp Knights training grounds. He apparently wants access to enter the library. His father had told him that he could only enter the library once he obtained Deputy Commander Melon's letter of recommendation. Only then would Count Khazar grant him the key. You see, the library houses all the dark magic grimoires of the Khazar house, and to learn dark magic, Chris must gain access. While Chris doesn't object to the condition, he's puzzled as to why it's even necessary since he's an important member of the clan. His father reminds him of the time Christian tried to sell the advanced grimoires on the black market. Even Chris has started to question the kind of life Christian led back then. The title, Good for Nothing, is certainly fitting. Now Chris's top priority is to get the deputy commander's recommendation. Among the knights standing around, Chris's little brother is present too. He doesn't waste a second before throwing a barrage of colorful remarks at his older brother. Of course, Christian finds it a drag that he has to deal with this brat once again. But as he thinks it over, a smile forms on his face. This might actually be a good opportunity for him. Thurn walks up to his older brother, orders him to turn around, and never return. He insists that Christian should not throw away the life he narrowly saved in the punishment cave. But Chris remains as sassy as ever, making the brat shudder once again by revealing that it was their father who gave him permission to enter the training grounds. At that moment, another prominent figure walks into the scene. This woman's glare could cut through steel, and it's clear she can't stomach Christian's presence here. Doesn't matter even if the Count gave him permission. For the record, this intimidating lady is Deputy Commander Melon. Her presence alone fills the air with 4-star dark energy, a clear attempt to scare Chris into running away like a sobbing child. But as we know, this is far from enough to intimidate our boy. The onlookers notice how Christian is completely unshaken by her dark energy, and even she tenses up upon realizing how unhinged he seems in the face of it. Christian greets her calmly and initiates the conversation. He acknowledges the wrongdoings of his past and the lack of trust people have in him, but he's ready to prove that he's qualified to use the training grounds. Christian proposes that he will fight against one of the fiends present here and prove himself by winning. Naturally, Deputy Commander Melon dismisses his suggestion as nothing more than a joke. But Christian isn't here to joke around. In a calm tone, he requests that she refrain from using her dark energy during their interaction. He humbly asks for an unarmed duel, as his capacity for dark energy is currently not what it should be due to his debauched lifestyle. Melon considers his request. Even if this is a duel, she